Hey everybody, welcome to Tea and Chocolate. I have an exciting and very thoughtful, very deep program today. My guest is Latonya McGorder. Latonya resides in South Jersey, right? Sewell, South Jersey, the eastern side of the United States. I am in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And today we're going to be speaking to Latonya, or I am going to be speaking to her about incarceration, namely the fact that her son is currently incarcerated. And she's going to share her life story today. And I'm really looking forward to this. This is such an honor to have you. Yes, it's lovely to meet you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here to tell my story. Thank you.
Thank you. And Latonya has a number of projects raising awareness with regards to incarceration, a podcast, a trailer, and also a book that she's been writing for a number of years. So thank you.
Yes. So do you want me to just start?
You just start, girl.
Okay, so
You just start.
Thank you. I Lauren, thank you for even inviting me. This is not an easy topic to tackle. And a lot of times people don't even want to hear from the victimizer's side of the family, right? It's like your kid did the crime, so you're part of that. And so, it on my part, it was very courageous for me to even speak out because I was nervous about how people would receive me. But, I was prepared for this many years ago when I got my master's in human services from, I attended the HBCU, Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, and we had to do an 8-week program, which ended up being our thesis. And so I was sitting in a Phil class one Wednesday, and I heard my Phil professor say the word recidivism. I had never heard of that word before. I was like, who? How do you even spell that? So he broke it down and said, recidivist is the noun, the person, recidivism is the verb. He just broke it down. And then I remember saying, wow, New Jersey has a lot of them. And it just so happened that I had gotten a job at a halfway house, working with nothing but inmates. And I remember I almost didn't take the job. I was the only one standing in this long line to do this on-the-spot interview. It was hot as Satan toenails that day. Everyone else looked like they were on their way to a picnic after the interview. I'm standing with heels and a dress, and the job was so exciting, but when they gave me the salary, I don't know what my face did, and I've worked on that over the years, not to let my face tell the story. And whatever my face did, the lady was like, oh, well, I can understand. She started gathering her papers. If you don't want, I said, no. I said, something is telling me I need to take this job. So we went through the training for that week, and at the end of the week, they noticed some leadership skills, and they actually made me one of the program assistant managers. So, it was an extra $1 an hour. How exciting was that, being a single mom with a son that was the size of a grown man, right? Barely feed and clothe this kid. But nevertheless, and then the director of that particular halfway house where I was at, he attended the same school, the same program that I was considering going to. And it was like handwriting on the wall. So I go ahead, I graduate, I do this 8-week program, and I do my thesis on the reintegration of adult inmates in New Jersey, reintegrating back into communities, back into their families. Now, mind you, at this time, my son was in middle school. So he was not my inspiration to the point where, I didn't have a whole lot of family members, despite what the statistics and what people think about African-American men. In my family, we had one and only 2 generations that ever went to prison. And once that happened, for no couple years, they never went back. Was like, yup, prison's not for me. I totally love freedom. And they haven't reoffended. So they aren't even recidivists. So that wasn't even my inspiration. And so I go on and I learn all the things I need to know about people who come home and why they recidivate and go back a year later for a whole different crime, not even their MO. And so the whole time I was being prepared for my son.
Right.
Because I didn't know. That was in 2006 when I graduated. I didn't know in 2010, February 22nd, that my son was going to end up being someplace with people he shouldn't have been with. And in March of 2010, was going to get arrested. That was the last thing I ever thought.
So can I just interrupt you for a second? So being a woman of faith and a pastor, what was that? What did that teach you? What did you get from that sort of this early onset of training, and then your son? What does that tell you about life? Or
it tells me that, you know, when we go to college, there are certain prerequisites that we have to take, and then there are the classes that we choose that we have to take, you know, for this completion.
Yeah.
I always tell people that God has a set of prerequisites that no matter how much you don't want to take it, if you're going to be something great, if you're going to be that person used in this world, in this universe, there are a set of prerequisites and classes that you're not going to sign up for, but you're going to have to take. And so, you know, we don't always know when we're in that class. Like when this whole thing that happened with my son happened, you know, because I've been such a spiritual person for such a long time. I grew up in the church. So I know the signs. I know when things happen in our lives. There are two reasons. One, we either bought it on ourselves, or two, it's a lesson. It's, you know, a lot of things we go through, it's not even about us. It's about the people we're going to come in contact with later. It's about the people that's assigned to us through this life journey that is going to go through the exact same thing you went through, where you're going to be talking to them and it's going to be like, oh my God, this is like a mirror. Like I see me, I'm looking at you, but I am totally hearing and seeing me. So yeah. That's how, those are the lessons that I learned. So now, you know, people say, you never ask God why. Well, if you want answers, you have to ask him why. It's all about the attitude in which you go to him. Like you can't go to him with this same attitude. Why you no, you just say, all right, I know there's a lesson to be taught here. I kind of need to know, how am I supposed to navigate this? Like, so now I just say, what chapter of the book do you want this to go into? Because I know it's a reason. It's always a reason. I didn't do nothing for this to happen. You know, I brought my son up in the admonition of the Lord. I brought my son up knowing right from wrong, but not restricting him, not being so holy and rigid. No, he got to do things. He got to have friends. You know, I wasn't as my parents were, because we couldn't wear makeup. Matter of fact, this whole look would have had me as a Jezebel, and I don't even have my red lipstick on and red polish, you know. So it taught me that this is bigger than me. These trials that I've gone through over these last 56 years of life, you know, life didn't start so easy for me. You know, I was molested from the ages 2 to 11. Wow. You know, a family member, a man that was my godfather. I don't know how this man became my godfather, my very first godfather. And then, you know, a stepbrother. And so I was fortunate and blessed that I wasn't part of the statistics, because statistics tell us that when girls are molested at such a young age, they either have some type of mental illness, bipolar, severe depression. A lot of times they end up on drugs and alcohol, bad grades in school, talking back to their parents. I had absolutely none of that. And I believe that God allowed me to block all that out during my years of going to school, because he knew at this time, at this age, that that experience was going to lead to help someone. And that experience was going to need to show somebody that you can still thrive despite the fact that you wasn't protected between ages 2 and 11. And I know that to be true because I was at church one weekend, and we had a concert, and in between the intermission, the person that was doing the concert asked me to participate in this exercise they call cardboard testimonies. And I said, well, what is that? So she said, Google it. So on cardboard testimonies, what you do is it's like music playing softly. It's no talking. On one side of the cardboard, it tells of the trauma. On the other side, it tells of the victory. So I said, I literally, Lauren, this is no lie. I would never lie to you. I literally heard the Holy Spirit say, it's time. When I audibly heard that, it's time. I didn't even have to ask the question, time for what? I already knew what it was time to do. It was time to talk about the abuse. One side of the card said molested from ages 2 to 11. The other side of the cardboard said no history of drugs, all good grades, no talking back to my parents, covered by the blood of the Lamb. And that night, after the concert was over, one of the young ladies from my church came to me. She said, Evangelist Latonya, oh my God. She said, no one would have never known that you went through that. We've known you for years. And I said, you remember Bishop David Evans over at Bethany Baptist Church over in New Jersey? He wrote a book, Healed Without Scars. I said, there's some scars that will still be visible, but then there's a healing that can come where no one will never, ever see no evidence that this happened to you. I said, and I am a testimony of being healed without scars. And the next day, that Sunday at church, the deacon and deaconess from my church had came to me and said, you know, such and such has been staying with us as, to give her mom some rest because, some things have been going on. And she said, she didn't tell us what happened in her family and why she was with us for respite. But she said, after your testimony, she came and told us what had happened. And I was like, that one person, if me telling my story helped that one person, I'm good. No one else has to be helped. I feel like my job was done, and it allowed me to be more comfortable about talking about the abuse. So I've shared at the courses that I teach at the college before we went on Zoom or online completely. I shared, and you'd be surprised of the people that emailed me, students that lagged after class and said, can I talk to you? Men who have inboxed me on Facebook that said, I never told nobody, but I was molested when I was a little boy, and it still haunts me today. I know I'm not gay, but it makes me feel like I betrayed myself. And it lets me know that what I went through, it wasn't about me. Someone had to be used. Someone had to be in God's toolbox. So when he needed to use that tool, he can pull it out. I just happened to be that tool for that particular thing. So that's the lesson that I learned when things happened with my son. I was distraught. This is my only child, the first grandchild in the family, the first boy in my little small family. And then this happened. Like, I had plans for this boy. He was in college down in Baltimore. He was going to be this big cook. I was going to buy him his first car. Everything just went left, like as far left that I could imagine when this ordeal happened with my son. Yeah.
So, how much do you want to tell us about that? How long is he in prison for? There's an end date to this, yes? Yeah. Hopefully sooner than the one that they're giving him. Yeah. So just a little background. So
My son had daddy issues, number one. And his dad and I had divorced, but we had made an agreement when he turned 11, he would move down south with his father because I felt like my part of the nurturing was done. Now, the whole teaching him how to be a man thing, I can't do that. That's above my pay rate. I cannot teach my son how to be a man. That's not what we as women do. We don't teach our sons how to be men because we're not men. His father needed to do that. So he goes down south at age 12. That June after school ended. For Thanksgiving, he wanted to come home because he loves Thanksgivings with us. His father sent him home with all his clothes and said, I can't do this. He's too much. My son manipulated him, kept getting in trouble. So, because he knew that his father would be like, you're going home. And his father fell right into his hands. He sends him home. That was interpreted, even though my son wanted to come home, but that was interpreted to my son as, oh, my father doesn't want me.
Yes.
That's how that was interpreted. And at the time, I didn't have the mental health background or education then, like I know now, because my son gained so much weight. He was eating like crazy, and he was eating out of depression. And I did not know that. Right. A lot of the things, the defiance that we were going through, but surely we never thought that he would end up in prison like that. Like one of his friends said, Miss Latonya, if I had to name all my friends that I thought would go to prison, they were like, Lance didn't even make the list. That's how out of the blue this was. So, you know, I had told him, when you turn 18 and graduate, you have 3 options. Either you go to college, you go in the armed services, or you get a job and move out by December, because we're in a bad marriage, honey, and we need a divorce. It's time for you to go. And so he was going to go into the service, but before that can happen, he had wanted a tattoo, and I said, nope, no tattoos until you turn 18. Well, he was turning 18, and that December before he turned 18, he goes out and gets a tattoo. Not only does he get a tattoo, but he gets it in visible places where people can see them. And they're like the corniest tattoos. They're like Taurus the Bull in his birthday. One with a big A for his middle name, Adrian. Music is my anti-drug. Rest in peace, Carlene. Musical notes, not even no Chinese something, no, musical note. Like these corny tattoos, but in places where the Air Force was like, this was the quickest conversation ever. Hi, yeah, this is a recruiter from the Air Force. Oh yeah, hi, how you doing? Oh yeah, your name, Lance Fulton. You have tattoos? Yeah. Okay, well, so you might want to try to go to the Army instead and then circle back around to us. I was like, the conversation's over, why'd you hang up? He said, yeah, Mom. They said, with these visible tattoos. I was like, I told you not to get them. So he had a history of not listening. So he starts hanging out with these people, these young people, and he gets introduced to this young man by the girl he went to the prom with. And so this guy starts kind of grooming him. And my son's the only child of my child. He grew up only child. He has 2 younger siblings, but they're in the South. So he grew up this only child and still quite naive and trying to fit in where he just didn't fit in. And this guy befriends him, and next thing you know, he's hanging out with the rest of them, and he keeps hanging out with them. And eventually what they did was they jumped him into the gang. Now, we didn't know he was in the gang. He wanted to move in with these people. I was like, I am not moving you. You don't need to be moving there. I went out and got him a place to stay. And he was supposed to, this is funny, Lauren, he was supposed to go back to school, right? After Christmas break. So I was like, oh, thank God. I had enough in him. So I'm at work calling, trying to go online to pay his tuition. He kept kicking me out. Call financial aid. I called financial aid only to find out that this boy had flunked 3 out of 4 classes. Now he lost his scholarship. I was going to have to pay $3,000 a month for him to stay at a dorm. I was like, my bills don't even come up to $3,000 a month. His butt is not going back to Baltimore. He never told me. Never told me. Weekend, but he doesn't know that I found out that Friday he was getting SSI benefits. I got this little newspaper from the neighborhood because I lived in South Philly at the time. I had found him a room to rent, paid for it. He had no idea. He goes out partying, gets locked out the house, kicks my door in to get in the house. I pull up to my house because I had stayed out, and I'm like, why is there a little step stool outside of the front window of my house? I was like, oh, this boy's insane. So we get into it. I call my mom in Jersey. I'm like, look, you need to talk to him because I'm about to commit a homicide. So I don't know what my mom said to him. Next thing I know, he was like, all right, Mom. So where's this place I'm moving to? His clothes were already in the car because I thought he was moving. So I moved him out. Doesn't work, moved him to 3 places. All of a sudden, he wants to move to Jersey in this house that's literally right down the street from my mom's house where we were raised. I don't know nothing about these boys, these kids, and you're talking about in plain sight. So back in the day when you would text somebody, you would add like a little tagline that always came up on every text, hashtag something. So mine's, I think, was hashtag God is good. So every time I text you back, that came up as well. And his said, hashtag Piru Park Boys. I didn't know what that was. It didn't even occur to me to even look it up. That's because God didn't want me to look that up. And I am the investigator of investigators. Like, you can hire me. I find people, things, and situations. That completely blinded. So my son a part of a gang. I didn't even know. I had no clue. He was living over in Philly. Then one in Jersey, one day he called me and says, Mom, can I come home? I said, nah, boo, we're in a bad marriage. He said, Mom, I'm tired of fighting. And he started crying. As a mother, you know that voice, that thing in your child to know, oh, something's up. So I said, do you have money? He says, no. I said, go to Miss Barbara, my neighbor, or go to Grandma, I'm getting money. Come over to the house and we'll talk. So he comes over to the house. I hear him come in. I'm upstairs in my room. I hear him go in the basement where his stuff was at. And prior to coming to the house, the Holy Spirit said, do not holler at him. Because I'm very excitable. So when he does something, the first thing is like, what is the matter with you? Why would you do? You know, that's how I come off. Don't do that. So he came upstairs. He said, Mom, I have to tell you something. And please don't holler. I said, okay. He says, Mom, I'm a part of a gang. This is how my face looked. I said, how did that happen? He said, Mom, I promise you, I did not go out looking for this. He said, you know, the people I have been hanging with, well, they was part of a gang. And one day after hanging with them for so long, they was like, N-word, you're about to get jumped in. And Mom, it's a big hole in Miss such and such house where we be at from where they all jumped me into the gang. I'm like, Lauren, I'm like speechless, like, oh my God. He was like, Mom, I don't know how to get out of this. Me being the mama bear, I was like, oh, we're going to get you out of this, right? He says, Mom, I said, the first thing you're going to do is not go back to that house. He said, well, I got some books there. I said, you get those books and don't you ever go back to that house. So January rolls around of that year because he moved in those people's house the beginning January 1st. This was like January, I guess the end of January. He says, Mom, I've been talking with my family in North Carolina. I'm going to move. I said, thank God. We wanted him to do that right out of high school. So I said, well, I'll tell you what, let's wait till the end of February. You'll get your other SSI check. You'll have money so you won't be kind of like mooching off of your family. And then, because all his support, like he was the only grandchild. His other first cousins that came behind him are 13 years and more younger than him. So he didn't have that up here, but his mom, his dad has plenty of siblings. It's like 8 of them, and they all got multiple children that live in the South. So he's close to them. So I said, you'll go down there, you'll, get a job. Your aunt's a principal down there. Maybe she can get you in the school. Anything will be better than living up here in Camden, New Jersey, which at one time ranked on number 1 on the biggest list of crime, and then down to number 3. It's one of the highest crime cities in America. So February 22nd come. We're living in Philly. It's snowing. It had snowed. There was plenty of snow out. I was working in Jersey. He wanted to come to Jersey. I said, all right, I'll stop at McDonald's in Camden, got something to eat, dropped him off. He walked to my mom's. I went to work. It was a Monday. That Monday, I teach on Monday nights. I go to the college after work. My son is calling his friends, and from his phone records, you see that they're missing each other. He'll call them, they don't answer, then finally they call him back. He ends up not answering because of whatever, and they're playing phone tag. Then there's a period of hours where his phone just goes dead. No calls in, no calls out. We established that that's the time he was at the house. He goes to the house, and this young man and young lady who are boyfriend and girlfriend who had been hanging out with them. Apparently this young man had stolen some liquor and money from one of the other gang members' house. And they have this thing in the gang culture that when you violate another gang member, you get dealt with. So that means if there's 10 gang members and 7 of them are at the house at the time where they gather, they all are going to beat on you for 2 minutes. That's what was happening with this young man. My son hadn't gotten to the house yet when this all ensued. So finally he gets to the house and he says, nothing out of the ordinary, Mom. The girls are downstairs with the guys, girlfriend, there, music's playing. And one of the other girls, part of the gang, call him upstairs and say, yo, we have a problem. Such and such Michael stole money. One of the other young men went into this boy's book bag and they saw a letter. The letter indicated that he was part of the rival gang. That's when everything went left. So, my son, in his naivety, he thought that because he did minimum and he didn't cause the death, that he was fine. This is how naive he is. He was like, Mom, babe, he didn't do anything to me, but as being part of the gang, if I didn't participate in the punching, then I would have been the next person to be dealt with. So as my son tells him, and the other testimonies of other young people, he goes down, he stays upstairs with the young man and he's talking with him. He's like, yo, stop fighting, play dead, don't do, And unfortunately, the other members of the gang are downstairs, and unfortunately, the young lady, which was the girlfriend, she met her demise, and the other young man ended up meeting his demise. And so my son thought, well, Mom, I didn't beat him with the bat. I didn't shoot him. I barely punched and kicked. I barely did that because, that's not me. I'm not really into things like that, which he really never has been. He's been that big teddy bear. He lays on you like a bad suit. That's the kind of kid he was. And so he had been all week long, he had been texting friends, do you have any family members at Amtrak train? Because I'm moving down south. This is how naive he was. Because if he was running, he wouldn't be telling nobody, I'm taking an Amtrak train down south to my family. He really thought that his part was so minimal that this person died, and then he had nothing to do with the young lady. So he really thought that he was not going to get in trouble. So he goes to North Carolina and he stays with his aunt, but because he couldn't get cell service, he moves closer and he moves with his uncle. And once he does that, he was down there about a good week and a half, and he calls me on a Friday evening. I had worked that, and this is the first chapter of the book, The Call. And he calls me, and that morning, I got off from work at 8 o'clock that morning, or 9, and I said, I'm gonna stay up so I can sleep, since I didn't have to go to work that night. So I did some errands, visited my mom. I cooked, and I took a plate of food down to the guy I was dating who lived a couple doors down. And he says, "Oh, won't you stay?" I said, "No, I'm really tired." So I noticed he had the movie Deep Blue Sea with Samuel Jackson. So I said, "Have you seen this movie?" He says, "No." I said, "I'm going to stay just until you see what happens to Samuel Jackson." Anybody that sees the movie knows he's giving this prolific speech, and next thing you know, the shark comes up and just takes him. And so I'm sitting there and I'm so tired and I'm not, and the phone rings. It's my son. He was like, "Mom." I said, "Why are you stalking me already? You just got there." He's like, "Mom, I think someone's after me." I'm like, "Boy, shut up. Ain't nobody after you." And I hear his aunt in the background. I was like, "Lance, ain't nobody after you." So he said, "I'm going to call you back." So he called him back and he was like, "Mom, it's a lot of cars in my uncle's parking lot. There's never this many cars here." So I'm like, "Boy, what are you talking about?" So he was like, "Yeah," and I can hear like the wind in the microphone of the phone. Like you can tell when someone's walking outside, that's how I can tell. So he said, "I'm gonna call you back." So when he didn't call me back, I was like, let me just call his uncle. So I was like, "Is everything all right with this boy?" He was like, "I hope you're sitting down." He's like, "I don't know how to tell you this, baby girl, but the federal marshals just kicked in my door, guns pointed, made my wife come out the bedroom with her bedclothes, hands up, put us against the wall, and said they're looking for Lance for 2 counts of first-degree murder." Lauren, I can't even begin to tell you how I just started screaming. I just started screaming. My boyfriend at the time, he's like, "Is it your mom? Is it your dad?" He's like naming everybody in my family. He's thinking someone died. I'm just screaming and screaming. And finally, I calmed down. I called my mom. I called my pastor. I called my sister. I'm calling a prayer warrior alert, major alert. Like I'm calling everybody. Y'all have to get to praying. Something going on with this boy. And I cried all night long. When I woke up the next morning, looked in the mirror, I didn't even recognize myself. And I tell in the book how it's this episode of the Martin Lawrence show where Martin Lawrence is doing this benefit fight with the famous fighter Tommy Hearn. And of course, he gets lumped and bumped up. And in the last scene of the Martin Lawrence show, he's sitting on the sofa hugging his wife, Gina. His face is towards the camera. When his face comes up, he has lumps and bumps and his head's like this big. That's what my face looked like from crying all night long. And so I went into like a state of depression for like a good year. I just, this was new to me. I didn't know. And the only thing that kept me from losing my mind was I had to teach 2 classes. So I had to leave out the house, which was a good thing. Because if I didn't, I would have been in that house. I wasn't eating. I had lost weight. I could barely take care of my plants and my dogs. And anybody knows me, my plants and dogs are very important.
Okay. Now, that must have been, as you were described, your response, like your reaction to that was probably one of the most heartbreaking thing you've ever gone through.
Yes, yes, very, very. You start counting. You become a mathematician when, to hear the judge say, "Lance Fulton, I remand you to 25 years in the New Jersey State Department of Corrections not to do no less than 85% no early release. To hear that.
Yeah.
And my son has this thing that when my son knows that he didn't do what he's accused of, he has this thing where his leg just is jumping uncontrollably. And I cried outside that courtroom, and I cried. And the saving grace of this was the grandmother of the young lady who died. Her grandmother and her uncle, because she was raised by her grandmother. Her mom was out on drugs, and so she was raised by her father's people. Before, during one of the court proceedings, the uncle came to me and said, listen, I just want to let you know that we see that Lance isn't like the other 9. We see a difference in him. We see that he was raised slightly different. And for them to see that, and my son had wanted me to apologize. And I said, well, Lance, I don't want to break any victims' rights, so I'm not going to say anything. Instead, they came to me. Mm-hmm. And then the day of the sentencing, I'm crying. I'm on my aunt's shoulder, and I'm just crying. And my aunt says, Mother Huff. She was a church mother. She said, Mother Huff wants you. When I turned around, she hugged me. She kissed my cheek. She said, I'm so sorry that Lance got all that time. And she started praying for me. She said, anything you need, you want to talk, baby, you call me. This is victims' family saying this.
Right.
Then the young man who my son did get convicted for, I remember seeing a page on Facebook, like a memorial page, and then I couldn't find it no more. Well, I found it, and I'm trying to see like who is the administrator of the page. And when I see it's this woman named Rhonda Sutton Gibson. And I inboxed her, I said, listen, I really want to talk to you about, the young man's name was Michael Hawkins. I like to give him a name, Michael Hawkins. Okay. And Mariah Huff are the 2 precious souls that lost their lives. Okay. And she said, well, can you tell me what this is about? I said, first, let me apologize. If you don't want to talk to me, trust me, I get it. And I apologize for even coming to you. I'm Lance Fulton's mother. She says, oh my God, I've been praying for you. She's been praying for me. Now, this young man's mother was in hospice dying of AIDS. His father had already died in prison. And this woman, he met when he was in a residential home. And she stuck with him even though he was out of the system. But she said she couldn't let him live with her because she was in the process of adopting children. And because he was a felon and had a history, he couldn't live. But she said they will always keep contact. They would meet. He would call, let her know, Mom, I'm okay. And she ended up burying him. She gave this young man the most beautiful funeral. And she used to be a corrections officer. So a lot of them contributed. Just gave this young man the most beautiful funeral. And so she and I had been in contact, and we decided to meet. And my alma mater, my alumni, we was given a scholarship. And I'm sitting on the bleachers waiting for the graduation to start. And she worked at the school. Our eyes locked. And I'm trying to get off the bleachers. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, Lord, don't let me fall. This will not be cute. And I'm sure somebody will get this on camera. So I'm taking my time. We hug. She's like, oh, my God, I didn't know it was going to be here. I was like, oh, my God. She was like, we got to take a picture when this is done. So we take a picture. And one of the reporters for the Inquirer newspaper out of Philadelphia, who had been covering the story of the murders, he says, called me. I saw a picture of you and Rhonda. Are you friends? I was like, well, we've supported each other. And he said, how did this picture come about? So I told him the whole story. And he was like, well, if I speak to her, will her story be the same? I said, well, unless she's on drugs and alcohol, her story should be the same. He calls her. Next thing you know, he has a photographer show up at my house to take pictures. She comes over to my house. He takes the pictures with both of us. The photographer sits down with us like 45 minutes. He says, I've never, ever sat down and actually talked with the people I'm taking pictures with this story. And it ended up being a huge story entitled Unlikely Friendship. And it was beautiful. Yes, it was a beautiful story in the newspaper. And she and I still keep in contact. We're friends. And me and this woman had so much in common. We drove the same exact truck, exact same color, same year. The day of the pictures, we had the same type outfits on. We both were working on our doctorate degree in education. We both had a love for young men coming out of the system. It was, and talk about synchronicity, it is, that exists. And so, and so that's how all this pain of a mother's broken heart came about.
Which is the name of the podcast.
That's the name of the podcast and the book.
And the book.
Yes.
So let me ask you this. I have a few questions for you.
Sure.
Lance, how is he today? What was his initial response to his felony?
He was panicked because he's an outdoorsy type of child. He loves to go out. He loves mingling. Like, he has my personality. You think I'm on 10? I say every day, thank God, because his father is an introvert. I said, thank God you got my personality. So that was very challenging to him. And so I had gotten some advice by a lot of my students were in that same halfway house that I worked at that said, Professor, tell him to take every single course available. Keep himself busy. Right. And you know what? That's what he's been doing for 11 years. So initially it was like, oh my God, Mom, we gotta get a lawyer. I said, Lance, this is your consequence. You're gonna have to walk this one out, baby.
Wow.
I'm here. And he has a perfect support system. The young people from our church that he grew up in, they have been holding him down for 11 years. Wow. They write him. They go see him. They send him money. They talk to him on the phone like regularly. Like, you would think he was away overseas in college or something. So
geographically, how far are you? Like, how do you visit him often, or is it easy?
Well, before the pandemic, we would visit him on his birthday and my birthday because I speak to him 2 and 3 times a day.
Right.
So the visits after an hour, I'm like, look, I'm ready to go home, right? Like, what else we gonna talk about? And then you're gonna call me before I even make it to the turnpike to get home. So he's about an hour and 20 minutes away from me.
Okay.
He was much further, but he got moved to another, a closer facility.
Right. What's that facility like?
So it's one of the oldest prisons in New Jersey. They actually filmed the Sylvester Stallone movie, Lockdown. They filmed the Spike Lee movie, Malcolm X. They filmed Escape from Alcatraz. All those movies and other movies that they just did with De Niro was literally filmed at that prison, one of the oldest. He actually prefers being there out of the other 2 places because of the church that's there. So my son, he accepted Christ as his savior, and he's self-taught bassist. He's a self-taught drummer player. He's dual language. He speaks Spanish fluently and English, like can pray in Spanish. He does praise and worship in Spanish. Like, this boy's incredible.
And how old is he now?
He just turned 31 back in April. I have a 31-year-old man child.
Wow. And so what does he aspire to do?
When he comes home, believe it or not, he wants a food truck because he has made these incredible recipes. He cooks. He's known for cooking. Like, young men I know that left the prison, and come home, and they come straight to my house and like, Miss Latonya, we didn't know Lance could cook like that. I'm like, how is he making pot roast and all this stuff? He's like, Mom, you find ways. So he wants to do some missionary work, like over in El Salvador, Cuba. Like, he does not want to come back to Jersey. And that's one of the reasons why I'm relocating to the Atlanta area, because he really wants to live in the South. He doesn't want to stay up here. So that's kind of perfect. I didn't know that.
Is the South, is the climate, I don't mean temperature, but is the climate in the, I would say, is it the African American community a bit different than, without making assumptions?
Yeah. No. Yes, I know where you're going.
Okay.
Yes. So the Atlanta area is kind of like the Mecca.
Uh-huh.
It is it's like in the Bible, the children of Israel went to Goshen. That was that land of safety for them. The Atlanta area is an area where African Americans really thrive. It's very versatile.
Okay.
And so, but it does have a slowness about it that's different from living here.
Okay.
And that's what he needs.
Is it do you know who Candace Owens is?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, I've often heard her say the fatherless sort of situation. I don't know where you stand with that, because that's, that's the first thing I thought about. I thought, oh, I wonder where his father was in the picture. And I'm wondering what your perspective is on that now, knowing that how he felt at such a young age, feeling unwanted from his father.
So initially, his father and I, we were married before Lance was born.
Yeah.
And initially, the first 5 years of Lance's life, well, no, a little bit more than that. The first 5 years, like before he actually started school, he would go and spend summers, months. People starting to think that Lance wasn't my son no more, because he would be there with his family. Yes. So that's why he has that strong bond with his father's family, something I always wanted him to maintain. And then as he got older, he would go down for the summers. But now in hindsight, realizing that there were some issues with his father mentally, that his father never got help for, not in the sense of being with that being such an introvert, not wanting to express certain things, shying away from everything. It was some other things. Being in crowds overwhelmed him a lot, and no one really understood that. And so, I helped my son to understand that there are some things that your father could have helped. Right. There's some things that your father could have done differently. I said, but then there's some things in his mental that doesn't allow him to be the father that he should be for you. And I never spoke bad about his father. I never called his father names. The only thing I ever said about his father was, boy, you look just like your dad. You hold your hand just like your dad. You give that same dazed look just like your dad. But I never spoke bad, because I knew that when my son got old enough, he would see his own self. And that's what happened. He saw his own self.
Right. Have you come to a place of acceptance and peace within yourself? Just in terms of him, I'm not talking about, or I don't know, maybe you went through a blame or something like that, but just the fact that this is his fate, and where are you at today with all that?
One of my very good friends that I graduated from high school with, Jerome Cannon, he was a retired corrections officer, and we would talk every day, and he said to me, my friends call me Tony. He says, Tony, he said, you are a good mom. You did everything right. Mm-hmm. He said, don't eat off that plate of guilt. Yes. He said, don't do that to yourself. Your son, 19 going on 20, he made decisions. Grown-up decisions have grown-up consequences. And that's what I like to share with families and parents and mothers.
Yes, with the podcast, I think this is an amazing thing that you'll be offering them.
Yeah. So I'm good. It's not always easy. To this day, I still have some days, like there's certain foods that in the first 4 or 5 years that I wouldn't cook because it was his favorite meal. Like
Right.
he loved smothered pork chops and gravy with rice and fried cabbage. I couldn't cook that for the longest. I would bust out crying. I just stayed away from cabbage, smothered pork chops, rice, and gravy. Like I had to stay away from it but as the years, and Thanksgiving was very difficult because he was always allowed to bring 2 people with him when we would go to one of my cousins' house here in Jersey. And so knowing that Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner, because he loves family, and we would be with a multiplicity of family. And him, the first couple Christmases and Thanksgivings were absolutely terrible. I've gotten a little better now. Thanksgiving is still not one of my favorite, I don't do the most anymore like I used to anymore because, my son's not with me. So it's hard, but he would always call and we would pass the phone around. Like when his Uncle Duck died, the one that he was at when they apprehended him, when he passed away, and he called and we were at the repast, I was able to pass the phone around. He got to speak to all his cousins, his aunts, his uncles. He even got to speak to his cousins that were born after he went to prison, but they heard so much about Cousin Lance. So, that's why I still go to family functions so that he can still engage with family.
Right. So it sounds like you, after, this happened, it sounds like you've done a lot of like deep reflection just in terms of family and, just the things that we all go through and how that may have contributed to his circumstances.
Yeah. I learned a lot being, that single mom. And one of the things that I tell my sister today, she has a son, and I always say, I said, don't make the mistake I made. Let your no be no. Because these kids will wear you down. They'll ask you something at 9 a.m, you say no. They'll ask you again at 12, you say no. They ask you again at 3, you say no. When they ask you again at 6, you're like, oh my God, just go. Yes, take it. Because they know they wore you down. But I had to learn that when you I tell this in parenting classes, when you tell your child no, and you give them that initial explanation why, there's no need to repeat it. So I started doing that. I would say, okay, I'm telling you no, and this is why I'm telling you no, and I'm going to give you a heads up. If you ask me this again 4 hours from now, it's still going to be no. I'm not going to give you another explanation because that will be time I can never get back. And so I tell parents that you have to let your no be no. And think about it before you say no. Because if you say no, but then you realize, oh, that was a little too harsh, I overreacted. Go ahead, now you're going to look like a liar.
Yeah. Has Lance forgiven himself?
Yes. Surprisingly, he's accepted his part. Like, to hear him talk and speak in such a mature, first of all, we thought the boy was dumb as a doorknob. I'm just going to be honest. He never brought homework home. One semester, he had my 5th grade teacher as a teacher. And I was like, don't go to this school acting a fool because I had these teachers. I've taught with these teachers. Don't be embarrassing me. I get his report card. I go up there. My 5th grade teacher says, who are you up here for? She looks, oh my God, you are Lance's mom? I'm like, yeah. She said, girl, I don't even have a grade for him. I'm like, what do you mean? She says, I don't even have a 0. He would go to the bathroom and never come back. There was nothing to grade him on. So he's matured in such a way where he encourages me. He can tell when I'm not having a great day. And he gives me encouraging scriptures. And I'm like, wow, look at the man that I produced. This is amazing. So yeah, and he's forgiven himself. He's dealt with it. And I'm happy for that.
That's good. Yeah, well, I'm happy to hear that for him. Mm. So apart from your journey with the podcast and, you're moving down to, Atlanta, what dreams do you have?
So I've always thought, like, in my mind, I've always thought I was a superstar.
Well, you are.
like seriously, like, I am a groupie for talk shows. So I went on, I did this game on virtual with Hoda and Jenna on the Today Show. I won a trip to Maribel.
Oh, yeah.
I won Oprah and Ellen's favorite places. I won a week's trip for me and my sister. I'll go to talk shows. I call in the radio shows. I've spoken to Joel Osteen and had him cracking up laughing on the radio. Like, I just love interacting. So I've always, like I said, I started with Blog Talk Radio. And my mom says that I have the story of telling stories. I have the gift of telling stories. Yeah. She's like, yo, you have been talking since you got evicted out of my womb. Like, and so I've always known that my talking should make me some money, gosh darn it. And then my other friends think that I should be a comedian because when I tell them stories of my son and growing up, and honestly, I don't even try to be funny. Like, it's just what comes to me. And like, my friends are gut wrenching, stop, I can't take it no more. I'm like, what? I'm like totally serious. So this whole podcast thing, this is what I want to do. Like, I want this to be my income. Like, I want to be able to make the money where I see struggling ministries, struggling nonprofits that I saw start. I actually have a nonprofit called Women of Color Creating Change. And the women of color is not Black women. It's women of color.
Yes.
My color, your color.
Yes.
All women coming together. And the original mission was to support the incarcerated population and their families.
Yeah.
So, I help out a lot. My son puts me in touch with a lot of the inmates. They call me. They have prayer with me on the phone. One of them calls me his big sister now. I'm going to be performing 2 marriages at the prison. Like they constantly write me and send me pictures, and I send them pictures. And for New Year's, I sent them little videos because now you can send the 30-second video clips through the website. And so that's a whole ministry right there for me. So I want that flexible freedom to be able to hop on the plane and go help in Louisiana because of the flood. I want to, you know what I mean? Because I don't want to be tied down. And that's why I quit my job. I was like, you know what? I was like, all right, God, you're going to have to figure this out. I can't figure this out. I needed a new car. I was like, if you let me get this car, it means you're paying for it because I don't even have a job. The way I got approved for this car was so outstanding. I still pinch myself like, holy smoke, I actually have a 2020 Nissan Rogue. How did this happen? Wow. And so that's what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to just constantly sow into the lives of people. That's what I want to do.
Sounds like a really great life purpose.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
It is.
Well, I'm honored to have you here to share that, to share Lance's story.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to hear that he's healing as he's moving forward in his journey.
Yes, he is. And, we had a scare when COVID hit because the prison kind of downplayed the amount of people at the prison that had gotten COVID.
Okay.
And, one of the young men from the church I used to attend, Dr. Fleming, he started advocating for them because they wasn't getting masks or nothing. And my son said, Mom, I don't know what Steve said to the warden or to the administration. He said, but I'll tell you one thing, Mom, we got a bunch of masks. I'm like, that's what we got to do. We have to advocate. We have to advocate. And, you know, just because you're behind prison gates, it doesn't mean you're less than a person. You still have rights. And someone has to advocate for that population of people. And you know, God prepared me for this, Lauren. Like, you know, I'm you know, I don't apologize for always bringing my spirituality in it, because that he brought me to this place for a reason. And I'm telling you, everything I touch, it might not immediately turn to gold, but it ends up being a golden moment. And I'm grateful. And I'm grateful that you were even interested to hear my story. And I appreciate you taking this time out with me today. I really do. Oh, and I love tea. And God knows I love chocolate, child. Chocolate, love chocolate. My favorite cake is chocolate on chocolate.
Oh my God.
I eat chocolate every night before I go to bed. I eat a square of chocolate. I'm not even playing.
Really?
Yes. I got chocolate in my refrigerator right now. I love chocolate. I've been eating chocolate all my life. I love chocolate.
Oh, me too. I always eat it at certain times. Oh my God, yes. That's so funny. Anyway, well, thanks so much for joining me today. Most appreciated.
Yes, I appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining me on Tea and Chocolate. And if you, want to reach out to Latonya regarding incarceration, she has a lot to offer. A lot of.
I can give you my email. My email is mothersbrokenheart@gmail.com.
And the name of your podcast, you've decided, is then?
Pain of a Mother's Broken Heart.
Yeah, look for that.
Yes.
Lovely. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.